Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to talk about how you can use Firebase and emulate uh, Firebase inside your own computer. Localhost your Firebase and simulate and debug your uh, pieces of Firebase or Firestore. So you can actually use identification. We can use Firestore Emulator, which is the database that Flowflow is using. We can use the real-time database as well, but this database is not used. But I'm just saying that you can use it if you want to. And we'll use the functions emulator, so you can actually simulate your cloud functions locally before deploying them into Firebase itself, before deploying them in because sometimes there are needs that you want to test your cloud functions locally, and then later send this to Firebase to production. Because if it's local, if it works locally, it should of course work in production as well. And we have storage as well. So you can enable storage as well, store files, simulate that as well. We have hosting emulator, so you can simulate or emulate hosting. We have pub sub emulator, and the final thing that we have is extensions emulator. So there is actually a lot of things that you can emulate. Uh, Let me just give you one example. If you go to Firestore, which is the database, uh, you can actually have your own database over here. So let me just show you how you can do that. So let me just show you how this works. Right now, I started emulator using Firestore, which is the database Flowflow is using, and I also emulate or start the functions, which are the cloud functions, and I also did with a pub sub emulator. So let's go to Firestore emulator, and when you go to the Firestore emulator, you can actually see your Firestore database. And it's an empty database because the whole idea is that you can actually can emulate and simulate your database. And let's say, for example, that I have users, and you can actually create here the collections. Let's say that I have users, the document ID, it's automatically populated, and then we have let's say the name, and this would be my name, and let's say we have like email, for example, which would be my email, and then let's save it. And now we have a document in this collection, users, and you can see it over here. And I can of course create another one, which is, for example, orders, and then I have like order ID, and then this can be my order ID, which is this one, for example. And then I have like order location, for example, or wherever you want to, and then save it. And now you should see the orders over here. So you can see it's a little bit slow, but you can see it takes a few seconds to see it. But now you have the orders. You can copy actually the orders, and then you can delete the collection, of course. You can copy the document, and you can start, of course, another collection. Or you can do another. You can do a new field. You can add a new field, and just it looks very similar to the actual production version of your app. And another thing that you have that we are going to use and talk today, it's about cloud functions. So if I go to the logs, you can actually see that these are the logs for my cloud function. And this is actually very useful because um, when you actually see this uh, and you run your cloud functions, it's very useful to see the logs and how the cloud functions run and what are the logs you can use, of course, because cloud functions use JavaScript and Node, and uh, you can actually console log to debug your cloud functions. And before we dive into telling you how you can set up this locally, let me just switch to YouTube and let me just show you the video that I really recommend you watching. Is this Kickstart Your Firebase Cloud uh, uh, Functions Journey with the flow step-by-step tutorial. So the whole idea is that this is how you set up your uh, Firebase environment in your local computer, so you can deploy Firebase functions. And the idea of this video is actually to teach you how you can debug the cloud functions before pushing them to production. So debug them in a test mode, environment mode, and then push them to production. So let's get started. So this is the output of the video that we're going to talk about today, and we are actually going to test cloud functions locally. And by using that, by doing that, we're going to use also the Firebase emulator as well, because we need to in order to test the cloud functions, we also need some database which we are going to use to test our cloud functions. So those are the steps that we're going to take for this today video. The first one is to initiate the emulators, and then we'll actually add some code to our cloud functions. So this is the code we're going to add. And the third step is we are going to run the function with function name and then dot start in order to run this function in the local environment and inside the emulator. And the final step we are going to do is we are going to run Firebase Emulators start only, and we are actually running that only because we want to only run functions and Firestore. And in my case, in my particular case, actually, because we are going to test to send push notifications to our user using the emulator. That's why we need the PubSub as well, and the PubSub is actually used for with cloud Firebase to actually send push notifications, send and receive messages, and those are the push notifications. So, like I said, because today we're going to try and send push notifications to the user, to a specific user. That's why we need the cloud functions, because we use a cloud function to send the push notification. We also use the Firebase to actually see the token to which the user and to the device that we're going to send the push notification to, and we finally need the actual functionality of sending push notifications, which is PubSub. So let's begin with the first thing, which is Firebase init emulator. And before actually we jump to the first step, uh, because we are actually going to execute most of the things inside terminal or command line or command prompt in Windows and in terminal in Mac devices and Linux. Before that, I actually wanted to show you how you can download the JSON file. So let me just switch real quickly to my project. So let's switch to my project real quickly. And then when you switch to your project, uh, you should make sure that you select the right project first, if you have more than one project, of course, and then click on this gear icon and then click project settings and then click on service accounts. And when you click on service accounts, make sure you click on Node.js because we're going to use Node, and then just click on generate new private key. Make sure, like I said, watch the video of set up your cloud functions because in order to run this command, first you need to have Node. So how do you see if you have Node installed? You have to do npm and then version and then click enter. And this is how you know that you have Node installed. And in my case, it's 965, but your case would be it could be different. But make sure it's at least 965 because this is the latest version. And then, as of the recording of this video, of course. And then in the Firebase, I think you can also do Firebase version. I'm not sure about it, but let's try it out. And yes, indeed you can. And the version that I'm using is 11.29.1. So when you have both installed, if you don't know how to install them, just watch, like I said, the video that I did for deploying cloud functions. And then the first command that we are going to use is Firebase init emulators. Sorry. And before we actually run that, currently right now you can see I am in the folder Firebase functions, but that doesn't really matter. You can actually you can actually run this command in any folder in your computer. It doesn't really matter the folder. The folder it's not sticked with Firebase and the Firebase functions. So I think you can run that in any folder in your computer. But I would just run it in functions because I want to be in the same place. And everything related to Firebase, I want them to be in the same place. So let's run that command right now, and you will actually see Firebase. You see my name, you see Firebase, and then it says what functionality you want to enable. So this is my project. You see the name of your project, and then you can say what are the functionality you want to enable. So in my case, I want to enable the function one, which you can do it with the space. You can see with space, I'm enabling and disabling the functionality. And then I will enable three functionalities. So function simulator, I will enable Firestore emulator, and I'll enable pub sub emulator. So you should see three green dots. And when you see that, just press enter. And you actually see, because I already emulate that, just press enter to all the prompts that you have. The default one is Y, which is yes. So if you just press enter, that means that you agree with all the settings. Just like I said, just press enter, enter, enter. I think 3-4 times you have to press enter, and then it should download the necessary code for that in order to run the emulator. Okay, and now when we are done with the emulator, we can actually run something. I prepared something really small, and before I run the emulator, let me first add some data inside the database. So I actually did a file for doing just exactly that. I don't want to add the data manually, because when you run the emulator and then stop it, the data will in your database will actually be gone. You cannot save this data. So that's why I did a file. So before I run the emulator, I'll just import all the documents and all the collection that I need. So let me show you how this works. So if I go, for example, and say nano test at notifications. So in my case, it would be nano test at, let's say, notifications dot .js, and I click enter. In here in Linux and Mac, I think we have Nano, but in Windows, you can just use a normal Notepad, and this is just use a normal text editor. This is a text editor inside the terminal, so that's why I don't want to switch screens, and that's why I'm using this terminal. But let me just paste the code, the whole code. You can of course find this code in the description, and let me show you. So first of all, if you remember the JSON file that you downloaded, just make sure the name of the file is out.json, and it is in the same folder. In my case, functions, Firebase functions folder. So make sure that this file is in the same folder. This will be actually the connection between your actual production environment and in your emulator. So make sure that that is the same. And then to connect to the Firestore emulator, we need to add this code, which is db settings, and then host, and then the local host. If you haven't changed the local host and it still is 8080, then you write 8080. If you change that, if you haven't clicked yes and change the local host port, then change it here as well. And SSL, I don't think we need SSL when running localhost. If you're home in a home safe environment and not in a public place, I don't think you need this enabled. And then in my case, what I'm going to do in my case is I'm going to send push notifications, and because of that, I will have like a couple of fields, and the first field is local crown, local user time, which you get the local user time, the server crown, the server time, the time difference between the two. In my case, it's 90 minutes, which is an hour and a half. And then define the title in the description of the actual title of the push notifications that I'm going to send, which is title and description, and then the UID of the user that I want to send this push notification to. And then we're creating a reference to the user using this code, which is admin.firestore.talk, and then the users, because this is coming from the users collection, and then the UID of the user, which is this one, and it's coming from here. And then the final thing is actually creating the document itself. In creating the document itself, will be local. We'll have all those fields, which are the local crown, the local user time, server crown, server time, time difference, title, description, and user reference. And then the final thing is actually add the new document to the notification collection. And we have the DB collection, and we're adding this inside the collection notifications, and we are adding the notification, and then we're actually console logging that the document is added successfully. We are getting the ID of the document, and then later we are also adding the new user inside users, because the database will be empty when we start the emulator. So that's why first we're adding the notification, and the notification document. The second, we're adding a user inside the user's document. And finally, we're actually adding a sub collection to the users collection, which is called FCM tokens, which is the same like structure what Flutterflow is using to send the push notifications, and we're adding the created at, the device type, and FCM token. I'm written here token, but you can actually write your own token of the person that you want to send this notification to. And then finally, I'm just saying NCM token signed successfully. And if I have any errors, I'm just displaying that the errors that I have. And then I can save this with Control X and then just write yes, and then it will be saved. And we actually done. We're actually done with adding the adding the data automatically. By doing that, by having this file, we're going to add the data automatically right now inside our database. And before we actually create the index.js file, we need to install some node packages. And there are 4 node packages we need to install. And the first one is npm install. And then we need to install the Firebase admin. So click enter to that. And the second one we need to install, I can just click the up arrow so I can get the last command. And then I can say Firebase. The second one is functions. So let's do that as well. So you can just ignore those warnings. It's not an error, actually. It's a warning. It's a warning that it says that npm version it's higher than the one this package is tested for. But don't worry, it should still work without any problems. And then we should install npm install and then moment. This is a package to deal with the times, and we need to install that as well. And then the second or the next package is npm install crowd parser. So let's install this crowd parser as well. And the last one that we are going to install is npm install only crowd without the crowd parser. So those are in total, there are 5 packages that we need to install. And when we are ready with that, we can just continue. And before we run actually the emulator, we have to add 2 more files. So the first file is index.js. So I'll do that again with nano. So I'll do nano index.js. And again, I'm getting an empty file. And I'm going to paste the actual content of the file. So I'm doing that with Control-Shift-V. I already copied the text, so I can do Control-Shift-V in order to paste the content of the file. And now let me just go through the content of the file. So, of course, like I said, you can use any text editor. You can paste the content of this file to any text editor out there. We have a few packages that we're going to install now. After we add this file, and then we have the JSON file again. We have the path JSON file again that I just show you how you can download out that JSON. And we have the project ID. Don't forget to write the project ID as well. It is actually, I think, in the same place. It's in the settings of Fire Store. You can get the project ID from there. You can actually click on project settings, and then in general, you should be able to see your project ID and just write it over here. And then we need this to run the Firestore Cloud function locally, and then this is my cloud function. So now I will not get into details of this cloud function particularly because I will go into do a video dedicated just for this cloud function. But the whole idea of these cloud functions is to send scheduled push notifications. Then the final thing is that we are going to start the cloud function, and then the final thing is we will have actually a trigger after we start the emulator. We are going to trigger this cloud function to run it. Okay, so this is the whole code, and then you can save it with Control X, and then just click on yes. And if you're using Notepad, just save the file. And the name of the file should be index.js, like I said. Okay, great. And then when you're done with this one, the final file that we are going uh, to use or to create actually, it's triggers.js. So we again using nano, and then we go triggers.js, and then click enter, and this is the code we're going to use. And like I said, this code will be again available in uh, uh, available in the description below. I'll post a link about it. Sorry. And the only thing about this file is to actually trigger the cloud function to run. And then again, you can save this file and then Control X and then yes to save it and then enter. Or in Notepad, just save the file. Okay, that's great. Now we have everything set up in place, and now we can run the emulator. So to run the emulator, we can actually do that using this command, which is Firebase emulators start only, and we are only starting functions, Firestore, and PubSub. If you want to run everything, you can actually remove that and then just start it like that. Okay, so this is the command we have to run in order to run Firestore emulators. Let's click run or enter, sorry, not run, enter. And then we actually will see the Firestore is running. The functions, the cloud functions should run again. You will see some, if you see some errors like mice, don't worry about it. They're not actually errors, they're warnings. And you can see over here that it says functions, loaded functions definitions from source, and the function actually that we loaded, which is this one, check and send notifications. And all emulators ready. It is now safe to connect to your app. Great. And we can actually click, in my case, I click Control and click on this link in order to open the link. And let's us now switch to this link and show you how this looks like. Okay, great. So we are inside the emulator now. The emulator is running. You should see Firestore emulator on, status on, functions emulator status on, and PubSub emulator status on. Great. That's amazing. That's wonderful. And now you can actually go to Firestore and you should see your like emulate of your database, and now you can actually create start to create your database. But what we did actually, if you remember, just a few moments ago, we created a file that we can run. So if you go back, I'm not going to show you that, but if you go back to your terminal on your CMV command line in Windows, you can actually run node and then test at notifications. So this is the command. Let me show you the command. So this is the command. that you can run. So if I run this command, let me go back and switch to the data. If I run this command in my terminal, of course, you have to be in the same folder, functions, and you can see, voila, everything that we did is actually created automatically for us. And you can see the notification document is created with all the fields, and you can see the users created, the user with all the fields, and you can see the token. The token is also created successfully. And that is great actually, because now we have a data that we can work with. And you can see this is how you can test. Of course, like I said, I can create a new collection, I can create a new fields, I can delete a document, I can delete all fields. Everything is working like it supposed to work. And yeah, that is great. And let's now test the cloud functions. And in our case, we are going to test and send a notification to, using this environment uh, emulator, sorry, to actually try and send a real push notification to a real device, to a real client. In my case, it's me, and it's my device. But you can send to any device out there, of course, just for testing purposes. Okay. Okay. So now let's test the actual cloud, a demo cloud function. So we didn't deploy this cloud function to the public or the production Fire base. So just keep that in mind. The whole idea is that not pushing those cloud functions to production, test them first inside this emulator. So this is, we can see that the cloud functions are currently running. In our case, because we're sent a push notification, we this should be on as well. And then let's go to the cloud function. So go to the logs actually, which is this one, and you can see waiting, and this is the path of my files. And then for cloud functions, and then loaded cloud functions definition from source, and this is the cloud function that is loaded, and pops up functions initiated, and this is the time that was done. And then we can go back to our terminal. Okay, so let's switch to the terminal again. Now that everything is working, the functions, the fire store, and pops up, you should actually leave this window open, because if you close this window, it will actually close your environment as well. So make sure that this is running, and then I'll open another CMD or command line 2, but in my case is a terminal, so I'll just open another window or another tab from here. So make sure that both tabs are now running. And on the other tab, on the new tab, make sure you're in the same folder. And now we can actually run this file called triggers. So if I run node and then triggers.js and click enter, you actually see that the function check and send notification loaded, and then you can see the current time that I'm loading this function. And then you can see the function, and then see the name of the function, and it says manually triggered. And then we have to wait, because this function actually triggers on every minute. So we have to wait to pass a minute or the clock to turn, because right now this function just ran at 23, and we have to wait to run at at 32. Now you have to wait this function to run in 33. So when this function run at 33 minute, the whole idea is to actually go to your emulator database, Firestore database, and then check for the user and check if the user has scheduled notification, and you can actually see that indeed this worked. And you can see that this was triggered. It successfully find the user, and it successfully find the token, and it successfully sent a push notification to this user and this token. So that successfully was successful. And then in order to stop this sending the push notification, you can actually click on Control C and the push notification will stop. And let's actually switch to the device itself to actually show you the push notification being received on my old device. So let's do that now. So this is my device right now. You're seeing my device, and the time is 34 minutes. So when it hits actually minute 35, I will be receiving the notification, and I switch the notification so you can actually see that better. And now any second, now it's 35, and you can see the notification being received with my custom your title. And before we go, actually make sure that you stop your trigger.js, as this will send unlimited push notifications every minute. So in my case, I would just click Control C, which will actually stop the cloud push notification. And then I can just just click again Control D. This will close the tab in my case, or you can just manually close the tab from the X, of course. And here, just when you're done with your emulator, just make sure you click again Control C in order to stop the emulator. So yeah, make sure you stop the emulator when you're ready. And just remember, again, when you stop the emulator and then start it again, everything that you've done in your database or every setup that you've done, it will be gone. So next time you start the emulator, your Firestore database will actually be gone and there will be nothing in it. So that's why actually we created this file. It's very important to have this file in hand to actually import those documents automatically, so you don't need to import them every time you start an emulator. Great. And before you go, I want to say that I set up this page to where you can actually have the code, and you can actually change the code as well. If you want to change the name of the collection, it will automatically be changed in your in the code as well, and then you can copy it, and you can also copy the widgets. In this case, we don't have any widgets as we're not working with Flow itself. We were talking about cloud functions and generally Firebase Emulator. But yeah, I set it up this website for my 2,000 subscribers. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, I have more surprises in the future for the 3,000 subscribers. So thank you very much again, and thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Take care. Bye bye.